people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap. We're going to kick it off with the WBC Super Bantamweight title fight between Jamie Mercado, the champion, still champion, and Ramla Ali, the challenger. I'll keep it short. I'll keep it simple. Ramla was robbed.
That's it.
Ramla was robbed, and that's it. By every quantifiable metric that is intended to be a quantifiable metric within a round in scoring a fight, Ramla was showing the cleaner work, the cleaner punches, the more effective aggression. Ramla was the one showing defense.
Ring generalship might have been in the air.
As control of the rounds and control of the fight was up for grabs, but not who's landing the cleaner, clearer punches, not who's showing the effective aggression. And how do you gauge effective aggression? Whether or not the punch actually lands.
Are the punches actually getting in? Are the punches actually landing? Because Jamie Mercado's weren't.
From the opening round to the final round, it was clear as day that it was Ramla Ali getting in with the cleaner, clearer shots, cleaner jabs, right hands, counters.
Snapping Jamie Mercado's head back.
And Jamie Mercado showed a good chin. She weathered those punches, but she was still getting hit clean and clear as day.
Scoring blows.
Jamie would quickly respond, throwing combinations, throwing flurries that weren't actually making contact. They weren't actually getting in. They were being caught on the arms and gloves. That even if she manages to back off Ramla Ali with a salvo of punches, they're not scoring blows because they're not getting in. So I can only make the inference that the judges were giving Jamie rounds just for throwing, not actually landing, just for throwing and appearing busier.
Even if she's not landing.
Because she wasn't. This was the site of yet another controversial scorecard I can recall.
Arizona.
One other dubious decision that I can remember was the scoring for the Chocolatito versus Gallo Estrada fight, the second one.
Which also took place in Arizona.
I remember watching that fight and thinking that Chocolatito is winning the fight. He's clearly winning the fight, and there shouldn't be any issues, there shouldn't be any controversy, and they gave it to Gallo. Then, like now, the same applies. I'm watching this fight and I'm thinking Ramla's got to be way ahead because she's the only one landing clean, effective punches, clear punches.
Here we go again.
So what do I think is going on here? Well, I think the judges in Arizona are partial towards the Mexican fighter, the Mexican national.
That's how it looks.
Like they were partial to Gallo Estrada in the Chocolatito rematch. They were partial towards Jamie Mercado in yesterday's fight.
Towards the Mexican national.
And don't get it in your head that that was the only funny-looking scorecard in yesterday's Matchroom show. The scorecards for the main event, those were pretty funny-looking as well.
Talk about that.
The scoring in this fight, 98-93, 97-93, and 98-92. That's how I would have scored it in favor for Ramla.
That's how they scored it for Jamie.
That if you take away all the context, you could probably give Jamie the rounds on activity, even though she's not actually landing. Punches are getting blocked. Some punches are outright missing. She's getting tagged clean.
Repeatedly.
I mean, if you're not aware, that's literally part of the scoring criteria for scoring a round within a boxing match. Clean punches. Effective aggression.
So how could Jamie's aggression be effective if her punches are getting blocked or if she's missing punches while she's taking punches?
It's just very clear to me that if you're facing a Mexican national in the state of Arizona, the judging is going to be biased in their favor. You're going to have to hit him with a chair.
To get a fair shake.
Because this wasn't a hard fight to score. And even when it comes to the co-main event, the Edwards versus Curiel fight, similar theme there. The judges had that fight a lot closer than I did.
Sonny won that clear.
Where the judges had that a very close fight. as Sonny Edwards was basically playing with him. He was playing with his food.
Stopped on cuts.
Sonny was fortunate to get the decision.
Ramla wasn't.
And I'm not completely sure where she goes from here. This was her best bet to become a world champion at Super Bantamweight. The only other champion at this weight, Erica Cruz, which makes for a much more difficult fight, by the way. She's all tied up in her anti-doping fiasco.
She's busy.
Nelly Scottney, this division's only unified champion, she's calling for a unification match with Yemi Mercado. So if they move on that, and they do that fight, well, those two are going to be busy with each other. Where does that leave Ramla?
Can she move down in weight?
She's already so thin. I'm not sure that she can move down to 118 and still be match fit. Perhaps she can move up to 126, but the girls are going to be bigger up there. The girls are going to punch harder. Winning a title could be more difficult.
She was robbed, man.
The prediction didn't stick. Ramla Ali was unable to lift the green belt from long-reigning champion Yemi Mercado. I should have factored in controversy into the forecast. That Arizona has been the site of controversy before. Here it is again.
Another dubious decision.
Even more evidence of partial scoring in the state of Arizona in the main event, that Bam was winning comprehensively.
Thank God he took it out of the judges' hands.
So one of the three judges had it 57-56 in favor of Juan Francisco Estrada, if you can believe that, who was losing comprehensively. You could see it. He had already been knocked down 2 times en route to the 7th round, where he was knocked down for a third.
The Mexican judge had it scored for the Mexican fighter.
So why am I not surprised? One of the other 3 judges had it 56-56, a draw going into the 7th. What about that fight looked like a draw?
What?
Only one of the 3 judges had Bam Rodriguez up on their scorecard going into the 7th round, where, thank God, he finished it and took it out of their hands.
And that he won by way of knockout is great, but what are you supposed to say about something like that, where one of the 3 judges actually has Gallo winning the fight?
That's ridiculous. There's no way, shape, or form anybody who knows anything about boxing could have been watching that fight and had Gallo ahead. And yet, here we are.
Javier Camacho of Mexico, he did.
Bam Rodriguez is of Mexican descent, but categorically, he's an American national, whereas Gallo, he's a Mexican national. So you don't need to be Kojak or Telly Savalas to know what the hell was going on here. Thankfully, Bam took it out of their hands by being quicker to the draw, faster on his feet with faster hands, and more power than Gallo Estrada,
who was always a step behind.
You could see it at the start, that he was always a step behind Bam Rodriguez, who was the younger, fresher fighter, stronger puncher, pivoting and uppercutting off the pivot. The uppercut was a very important punch for Bam Rodriguez in this fight.
Very effective.
Did a lot of damage with those uppercuts. He would pivot to get a new angle on Gallo Estrada to put punches in there, and uppercut off the pivot, right up the middle.
This was high-level boxing.
I want to say that had Gallo Estrada actually fought in the last 12 months, if he had had 1 or 2 fights last year, he probably would have did better this one, because he was hanging tough, weathering the punches. It took a lot to finally get him out of there, and if he had been fighting,
I think he would have been in better condition, and I think he would have lasted longer.
But you can hardly blame Bam Rodriguez for what was or wasn't Gallo Estrada's activity in the previous calendar year. That if you wanted to fight, I'm pretty sure you could have had a fight. There was an offer on the table for you to face Kazuto Ioka and unify titles with him. You chose not to. You chose to sit out. You didn't fight anybody. So when a Bam Rodriguez fight swings around,
we can't blame him for your inactivity. That's your fault.
Always a step behind, though still trying to respond in kind and keep up with Bam Rodriguez. That whenever Bam would get off a solid shot, Juan would quickly respond.
Knock Bam down for the first time in his career.
After being knocked down 2 times himself, in the 6th round, Gallo dropped Bam. For the first time in Bam's career, it was really a balance shot, an off-balance shot.
Because Bam wasn't hurt, wasn't on jelly legs.
After he got dropped, he popped right back up. His equilibrium was fine, but Gallo caught him with a good one, caught him off balance, and dropped him in the 6th just to get stopped in the 7th. You could see with the punches were doing to Gallo.
That's why Javier Camacho having a fight scored for Gallo going into the 7th is ridiculous.
Gallo was always a step behind Bam, and you could see what Bam's punches were doing to Gallo. Thankfully, in the 7th round, Bam took it out of the judge's hands with a counter left hand, a body shot that folded up Gallo Estrada like a beach chair. Noticeably hurt, he couldn't beat the count, and the fight was over. Post-fight, Gallo Estrada declared that he means to activate the rematch clause. And bear in mind, I wasn't even aware this fight had a rematch clause attached to it, but he says he's going to activate it, so we might get a sequel. I don't really want one. It was a great fight to watch while it lasted, but it was mostly one-way traffic. I mean, Gallo did his best to make a fight of it, but for me, Bam was winning this thing clear.
We don't need to see a rematch.
If Gallo really wants one, you know what I would prefer? Let Gallo go after the WBO champion at this weight. Let Gallo go after Japan's own Kosei Tanaka for his WBO title. Win it.
Win the fight.
While you're doing that, let Bam challenge the winner of Kazuto Ioka versus Fernando Martinez for what would be 3 of the 4 major titles at this weight. You take care of Kosei, let him take care of the winner of that fight, then you guys settle up with each other.
Makes sense.
As Bam Rodriguez was asked about a potential fight versus Naoya Inoue, he said, I know people want that fight, but let's be real. Right now, it's a fantasy fight. I've got to work my way up. He's at 122 right now. I'm at 115. I've got business to handle in this weight class. I want the winner of Kazuto Ioka versus Fernando Martinez unification fight on July 7th.
That's next Saturday.
That makes a lot more sense to me than an immediate rematch, given how lopsided this one was. I don't think Gallo's too old to win a world title. I don't think Gallo's too old to beat Kosei Tanaka. Kazuto Ioka wasn't back in 2020. I don't think Gallo is now. I think Gallo could beat Kosei.
Set it up.
Bring it back to Arizona, or have Gallo go to Japan.
That is the premier market for the lower weights. Flyweight, super flyweight. There's a big audience out there for them.
They should do it. That if you really do want to put on a Gallo versus Bam rematch, build it up a little. Let it be for undisputed.
Bam delivered.
I had Bam winning a points decision. I wasn't sure if he would stop Gallo Estrada. Gallo's never been stopped. And he went a step further and did that.
You stopped him.
It was just a fantastic display of boxing. A fantastic display from both. If I'm being honest, Gallo was just a step behind. But Gallo has no one to blame for that but himself.
Matchroom's got a star in young Bam Rodriguez, who continues to impress, continues to show up and show out for the big fights.
Congratulations to him. We then move over to the Top Rank show, where reigning 2-division, 2-time lineal WBO champion Teofimo Lopez defended his title against the unheralded Steve Claggett. So context is key.
It is.
Teofimo definitely won the fight.
There's no question who won the fight, why, or how.
Though not in a fashion in keeping with the air that he has about him. It was a workman-like performance.
He labored.
He struggled with Steve Claggett. He couldn't really get Steve's respect. He didn't really keep Steve off of him. He caught him in between.
Between the punches.
With counters and hooks and uppercuts up the middle, he did a good job of countering Steve Claggett, but not landing with enough authority to get Steve off of him or to get Steve out of there, which is important because Steve's been knocked out before. He's been stopped before.
2 times.
But not yesterday, and not by Teofimo Lopez. This speaks to what I used to talk about in reference to a Lopez versus Matias fight, that Teofimo Lopez has the right style for the job, though I don't know if he has the right pop or durability.
Steve Claggett was all in your face yesterday.
So what would it have been like if it were Subriel Matias in place of Steve Claggett? Subriel is a stronger puncher and a better mid-range to inside pressure fighter than Steve Claggett. Nothing against Steve, but he's an unheralded guy who's never fought on this level before.
He's a pressure guy.
You can see he's a pressure guy, just like Subriel Matias, but Subriel is more proven at this level that he's a better grade of pressure fighter than Steve Claggett. So if Teofimo were fighting him, how would that have played out, and how well would Teofimo Lopez have taken Subriel's punches?
That's a legitimate question.
Previous instances where I've talked about this, a few spirited Lopez fans who give him a bigger vote of confidence than I do,
They get offended.
that I don't think he's serious about fighting Terrence Crawford, and if he got what he wanted, what he's asking for, he'd get butchered.
Yeah.
They get upset whenever I say that.
This guy got beat. by George Kambosos, upstaged by Sandor Martin.
Out-hustled by Jermaine Ortiz. And yesterday, even though he won, and he did win, he didn't look nothing special. He didn't look nothing spectacular. And he was wearing Steve Claggett's handiwork on his face. Both his eyes were swollen. So what that tells you is Steve was getting in with his punches.
Teofimo was countering effectively. It's not that he wasn't, but context is key. For the fighter that he claims to be, the level at which he claims to compete, this performance was not in keeping with that.
I long held the belief while Teofimo was still at 135 that if and when he moves to 140, he won't be as big up there and he won't land with the same authority. So far, he's only knocked one guy out since arriving at 140. One guy, just one guy, and that was Campas about 3 or 4 fights ago.
His first fight at 140.
Obviously, he didn't knock out Sandor Martin or Josh Taylor or Jermaine Ortiz or Steve Claggett yesterday, but it's more damning with Steve Claggett because he has been knocked out before. He has been stopped 2 times.
It's negligible with the others, but not with Steve because he's been knocked out before.
That's not saying that you have to knock the opponent out in order to win the fight. No, you can win a decision. You can win a convincing decision.
What did yesterday's decision convince you of?
That Teofimo don't land with the same authority at 140 that he used to at 135. He doesn't punch as hard up there, and that if and when he moves up to 140, up to 147, he's going to run into some trouble.
He doesn't seem to be getting better.
In the last fight, the story was he couldn't get off meaty punches because the guy was running from him. Jermaine Ortiz was running from him all night. Yesterday, this guy fought the opposite fight. He wasn't running from you, he was bringing it to you.
Still struggled.
He's not improving as a fighter, I think. He's not getting better. That alterations to the corner need to happen for Teofimo to hit that next level, to improve, because he doesn't look like he's improving. He was a big, strong, fast kid at 135, but he's not so big and he's not so strong at 140. You can't rely on physicality as much at this weight. And if and when you go up to 147, it's going to be even worse.
Guys are going to be bigger up there, more durable, punch harder. What are you going to do?
You often hear it said that styles make fights, and for the most part they do, but you also have to account for physicality, a fighter's physical dimensions, their wingspan, their ring coverage, their punching power, speed, age,
stamina.
Teofimo looked like he was fighting off a swarm of bees yesterday. That's what it looked like, as Steve Claggett periodically crowded him, backing him into the ropes, and Teofimo was countering effectively, but I reiterate, he wasn't landing with the same authority that he used to.
And this was the opposite of your last fight, where you were frustrated with a runner. This guy wasn't running.
It's not hopeless, you know, the plight of Teofimo Lopez, because he's still young and he still has some tools. He just needs to add someone to his corner because he can only get so far with his father and his current situation.
Bring back Joey Gamache.
The Teofimo Lopez that people most think of is the Joey Gamache version of that fighter. When he was still lightning fast and sharp and strong, he just seemed a lot more coordinated then than he does now.
Tactically and technically, he did seem better.
Or is that just sleight of hand? An illusion created by the size he had at 135 that he doesn't really have at 140. It's hard to tell, but I don't think the situation is hopeless. With some alterations to the corner, adding some tools to his repertoire, I do think he can improve, and I know he has time because he's still young.
But he needs to do something.
He won yesterday. He definitely won, but not in a fashion that is in keeping with what he says he is, what he's supposed to be.
Wasn't impressive.